I remember when I first came to see you, my biggest priority at the time was I just want to quit smoking. And I had tried everything under the sun for many, many years to quit smoking. I did the patch, I did the cold turkey, I did it all, right? And it was every time it was a painful experience, it was a difficult experience, and it was an unsuccessful experience. And so for me, all I wanted was an easy way to quit smoking. And that was just the end goal. I never looked at it any deeper than that. I just knew I didn't want to smoke anymore. It wasn't healthy for me. That was it. I never thought about what was actually causing me to want to pick up a cigarette or the overeating issues that I was having and all of those things at the time. That wasn't my priority. It was just quit smoking. So I remember sitting with you and having a consultation in your office in Miami and asking you, like, what happens? How do you get into my brain? How am I going to know, what
Sure.
you're doing to me while this is happening? And I had all these questions. So I thought if you could just kind of explain how you answered that question.
First thing I would say is that all hypnosis is really a form of self-hypnosis. So essentially, a hypnotist is basically a guide who helps you to access a state of mind in which you're able to learn and unlearn things more easily and more quickly. And effectively, that's what hypnosis is. It's a normal state of relaxed focus or concentration, even if it's at a different kind of level as compared to our normal way of focusing and concentrating. And that's a different brainwave state than when you're hypnotized. But it is a state of consciousness, meaning you're not asleep when you're hypnotized. So you are awake. Your mind might wander or zone out as it might during daydreaming or things like that. But it's a state of mind where you retain full control of yourself.
And I do remember being completely aware of what you were saying the entire time. But also I remember, like, you had said to me, it'll be like the flip of a switch. I walked out of there and we had 3 sessions scheduled. And after my first session, until 10 years later, which we'll get to, that's when it gets fascinating, but I never picked up a cigarette again. And it was the easiest thing I'd ever done. You had absolutely achieved everything that I'd hoped you'd done and more. But what I found even more fascinating, Todd, was what happened years later, right? So fast forward 10 plus years, pandemic hits, right? I'm working in the cruise industry at the time. I'm going through the cruise industry took a major hit, very, very difficult time in my life. And then at the same time, the man that I was dating at the time, finding out, that he had been with other women and leaving me a week before Christmas, and just, all of these things started to surface. And before I know it, I pick up a cigarette and then another one and then another one. And that's when I realized, like, there was a bigger underlying issue that was never addressed initially, right? We addressed the quitting smoking. We addressed, the fact that I didn't need to replace one with the other, but we weren't going deep into the root cause, right? Which I don't even think back then I would even have known or understood. So I remember picking up the phone, finding you, Googling you, and finding you in a different state and organizing a call with you and having this amazing conversation about that.
We all have a subjective experience that based on what we're perceiving in the outer world or what we're imagining or remembering inside, and that experience has a particular structure to it. So we can have different experiences. And so by altering or shifting elements of that experience, the structure, in other words, we can change the experience. This is important for, say, trauma, and I'm not talking about PTSD. I'm saying loosely defined any emotionally distressing or upsetting experience that we haven't fully processed or dealt with creates certain beliefs and learnings that stem from that event or events. And that belief or thinking pattern creates emotions, which then often create behaviors. So when you mentioned resolving the root issue, like anxiety, very often that's just the belief, I'm not safe. It can be general, like I'm not safe on this planet, in the world, in my life, in my body. I'm not safe on airplanes. I'm not safe around men with beards, whatever. I'm not safe around dogs. So there's some belief, subconscious belief, meaning the person can deny it logically, rationally, but they still react as though it were true. and they learned it because we weren't born with these problems. So people learned through some experience, maybe traumatic, maybe witnessing a parent freak out on an airplane, if that's the case. And so the person develops the belief, I'm not safe, dot, dot, dot. And
Yeah.
then when they're in a situation, general or specific, that matches that belief system, the fight or flight response is triggered in the case of anxiety, let's say. And so then they have an emotional reaction that's called anxiety, and then the physical symptoms of that. And then very often, if this is a constant thing that the person has to deal with, they will find behaviors that will alleviate that discomfort, typically drinking or taking prescription meds or eating. And if it just gives them a little bit of a break from that crappy feeling, then hey, that's successful. Now that the problem is it solves the problem short term, but doesn't change anything in the long term. So this eventually becomes an emotionally compulsive habit or addiction. And this is why, how critical it is to deal with the underlying root issue, which is usually trauma. Most people have experienced some form of trauma that, even if we look at it objectively as an adult, it's so small. When we were a child, that might have been overwhelming. And that is the thorn or the weed, the roots of the weed. And that is what needs to be dealt with, because from that develops the belief systems, the emotional and behavioral issues that people present as their main problem, but they're only symptoms. Yeah. So by dealing with the root issue, we resolve that and all of the symptoms that come from it.
It's not easy work. What you and I did together, the journey that we took together most recently, was the hardest inner work I've ever done, because it brought out, pain that I had pushed down for so long and memories that I had pushed down for so long. But it is freeing work, and it is great work. And it's something that, you can gift yourself at any time.
There's still a big stigma about people who have problems dealing with things relating to their mind. Like, I'm just depressed and I can't get out of bed, or I'm always nervous and I don't know why, or I can't stop, gambling or drinking or shopping or something. There's a shame associated with that, which is really wrongheaded, because we're all human, and part of maybe one of the definitions of childhood and adolescence is the period during which you get screwed up. And then your job as an adult, if you choose to accept it, is to get unscrewed up. Yeah. Unfortunately, most people don't have the self-awareness to really, well, one, they may not even know what the problem is. Two, even if they do, they don't know why it developed and how they have unwittingly managed to maintain the problem. Like trauma, for example, is not the event. It's the mindset, beliefs, perceptions, and everything from that develops as a result of that experience. So you and I could have two very different subjective experiences of a car accident we watch, or someone if we see get shot or something. And that's because it's not the event, it's what's going on in here. So this is one reason why typical talk therapy is not very effective for most people. Or if it is, it's not efficient. It takes a very long amount of time. That's because that operates primarily at a conscious level, which is the level we're talking at right now, which is awareness, understanding, analysis. And that's only controls a tiny percentage of everything our mind can do. Most of the mind is run by the subconscious, which governs, behaviors, beliefs, emotions. And that's the irrational emotional part that thinks short-term in terms of, how do I feel better right now? How do I stay safe right now? Yeah. It doesn't have the ability to say, well, that's not logical. So if we analyze the crap out of it and we understand and we talk about it, that's a good first step. But that's rarely going to transform what's underneath. And once that transformation takes place, then all of it is resolved much more quickly. One of the key drivers of all behavior, and I mentioned this a lot in my book for smoking, is that it's your identity. And so if you identify with something, and I am a smoker, I am an addict, I have an addictive personality, that's all bullshit, quite honestly. But society reinforces this terminology. Some therapists, well-meaning, or doctors will tell someone, well, you're an addict, you're an alcoholic. The 12-step programs, for all the benefit that they may have done, don't work for 90% of the people who go through them long term. And one of the reasons is because people are forced to identify with their problem, which is a huge mistake, in my opinion, because that is incredibly disempowering. If a person can look at this and take ownership of it and say, look, I am creating this problem.
Yeah.
And that means I can create the solution with help. This problem is my baggage, like a suitcase. It's not me. I may be attached to it, but I can let it go. When you're a child, you're overwhelmed by the smallest thing. And then that kind of crystallizes a belief system and a reactive, a habitual reaction emotionally, or principally emotionally. And then we carry that with us into adulthood. Most people are still children because they've never really grown up. They're still operating from the mindset, the limited framework of a child. And that's very dangerous when you give people like that, real responsibility.
We all have that ability to take responsibility for our actions and to take ownership. I think that's so important what you just said there, because there is, again, yes, we have issues that we need to resolve. We need to, first of all, have self-awareness that that's the case. We have to have compassion for ourselves. We have to give ourselves a little grace. Then we have to be willing to ask for help. Then we got to do the work. Like, these are all things that take place. We talk about this a lot in my seminars and workshops. You are the author of your life story. You have the ability to change and rewrite your story anytime you choose. And so, but it starts with saying, hey, I created the story of my past. I accept that.
People usually come in and they say, well, I can't stop worrying, or I can't get over this ex-boyfriend. Most people are not aware of what's causing it. If they've been in therapy, they're probably aware of what's causing it. The awareness of it rarely resolves the issue. Sometimes it does, but you can know every detail. And by the way, a lot of it is speculation because our memories are really by definition inaccurate. So we believe our memories about certain experiences at our own peril. Most people do believe that, and that's part of what locks them into a traumatic story from which they struggle to escape. So the point is, they can be told exactly why they're, quote, screwed up, meaning why they have unhealthy coping mechanisms. But that doesn't mean the person helping them identify it knows how to resolve it, because again, it has to be resolved at a subconscious level. And this is one of the main types of work we do, Gina and I, my wife, but we do with trauma, which has become our primary focus over the last 5-6 years, because it's called memory reconsolidation. And it's a phenomenon that happens naturally in the brain automatically, that when we think of something, when we remember something, that pathway in the brain becomes malleable. So what we do with a lot of the trauma work is we intentionally change it so that it's no longer disturbing or destructive to you emotionally or behaviorally, but you still retain a full awareness of what happened. Yeah. It just, like, you can picture the dead body, but it doesn't bother you. Yeah,
you're removed from it. You're not. It doesn't define you anymore.
And by the way, it never did. And that's the problem. Right. Is people identify with their addiction or with their breast cancer survival or their sex abuse survival or victimhood, whatever it is, and that keeps them trapped in the pathology of that identity. And it's it happened. Shit happens. I'm not without compassion. I've had shit happen in my life, obviously, and people in my family. But shit happens, and then you flush. That's just the way it is. Yeah. We have to be aware of when we start getting stuck on the story, or if we get a lot of sympathy for that story, that rewards us for staying stuck.
Yes, because it's, like I said, it's hard work, but it's good work. I am such a fan of all of the resources and tools and people that are available to us to help us, whether it's to help us identify what the initial cause was in the beginning, or help us eliminate that attachment to it, or whatever. But I will say, I've done so many things in my life, and I've read probably every self-help book that's out there. And I obviously this is my world, right? But what you did and what you were able to accomplish for me was hands down the most significant, most powerful experience. And I'm so grateful to you for our years of friendship and for everything that you've done to help me in my life and to improve my life. And I want it for everybody. I was surprised at how effective even doing the virtual sessions were versus live. Like, it made no difference to me.
Right.
So it's just the content, I think, and the journey that you're able to take your clients on is what matters in the end result, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And that was
I was nervous when it was the pandemic, and you were
right. Well, yeah, and that's a great point, because we had been here and there seeing people by Zoom or Skype at the time, and not people in our area, but people who saw our videos on YouTube, and Gina saw someone in Australia. That was hard to schedule, but otherwise, it works fine remotely. And then when COVID hit, we pretty much went to exclusively by Zoom. And that works pretty much just as well.
And I still listen to a lot of your audio stuff that you shared with me. So thank you. And again, from the bottom of my heart, thank you for being you. I'm so glad you're in my life.
The only person I can be. So thank you, though. I appreciate that.